There is only one body, that is why we sing. Bind us together, Lord, bind us together with cords that cannot be broken. Bind us together, Lord, bind us together, Lord, bind us together with love.
Today's sermon reading will be from 1 Peter chapter 5 verses 8. 1 Peter chapter 5 verses 8. And it's, be alert and of sober mind, for your enemy the devil prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom to devour. God add a blessing to his holy word.
Coincidence that Paul mentioned that in his call to worship. The devil is prowling like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. In the 1st of December 2016, a man called Shaheen Islam was mauled and killed by a lion. Now, those of you who know Alan McNichol and know that he goes on these trips to Zimbabwe and works in some orphanage, but he goes on these things walking with lions, and he's got some amazing pictures. And he's actually told of some who have been mauled by lions in that complex where he goes and works. But Shaheen Islam was actually a lion tamer. He was a 35-year-old lion tamer in Alexandria's lion village. It's known as Lion Village in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. And he was actually, at the time, giving a presentation to some students. And there's actually some video footage of him in the cage with a lion. Students are all around outside, and it's been taken on their phone. And he's actually up, nose to nose, with the lion, right up beside it. And the lion's okay. But after, just all of a sudden, after a few minutes of the presentation, the lion goes for him. And the quote was that the lion throws the trainer around the floor like a rag doll. And Shaheen suffered fractured skull, broken bones to his chest, deep cuts and lacerations to his face and body, and suffered abdominal bleeding. I believe that he survived for a few days and died a few days later in the hospital. His brother actually said, Shaheen has been in this profession for 10 years and had a lot of experience, and here's the key, but the lion took him by surprise. The lion took him by surprise. Thomas Chipperfield is currently the only lion tamer left in the UK. And he tells the story of another Egyptian trainer called Fatin El, who, I don't know how to say that, it's H-E-L-W, however you pronounce that. A female, I believe, lion tamer, and she was actually attacked in February 2015, and she survived. But Thomas Chipperfield's quote was, "The only mistake she seems to have made is a split-second lapse of concentration." Two key statements there. One by Shaheen's brother, the lion took him by surprise. One by Thomas Chipperfield, a split-second lapse of concentration. Now, I personally am uncomfortable with the sight of these large animals performing tricks for human beings and all the rest of it, you know. But whatever you think of that, if you're for it or against it, personally I'm uncomfortable with it, but we can learn something from what has happened in these two instances and many other instances like them. We can learn something spiritual from that today. And I guess there are going to be a few things we'll look at, but I guess the main thing will be when we're thinking about the devil prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, never drop your guard. As a Christian, never drop your guard. You think you're strong. You think you're safe. Paul himself said, take heed, he who thinks he stand, lest he fall. I remember one of our own young men years ago who fell away from the Lord. And before that, it was he would make statements. We'd be driving to a gospel meeting and he would say things like, I love our wee church. He would say things like that. And he was falling away and things were happening in his life and it was clear what was going to happen and we were talking with him. And he said to me, he says, Adam, I never thought it would happen to me. Never drop your guard. Satan is prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Why a lion? Why does Peter choose to characterize Satan like a lion? When I was thinking about that, I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the lion and look at some of its hunting techniques and just behaviors. And so here are some things about the lion. Who does the lion attack? When does the lion feed? And they're going to be easy to remember because it's going to be the distant, the divided, and the doomed. Those are the three things. Dead easy, all beginning with D. All right, could have thought up better words, but they wouldn't have been as easy to remember. The distant, the divided, and the doomed. Let's look at the distant. Those who are away from the herd. The lion deliberately looks, and at the very end of the lesson, we'll see why this is true. The lion deliberately looks for those who are away from the herd, from those who are grazing, slightly separated from the herd. Here's a quote by some expert in lion. I couldn't find actually the name of the person who wrote this in the article. In Africa, lions will lay out watching herds. Lions know their own strength, but they also know the strength of numbers. When the lion looks at a herd of zebras, he knows if he attacks one and the herd stampedes, they could trample him. So he looks for the ones who have removed themselves from the herd. When that zebra gets far enough away from the pack, the lion pounces, pulls it into the tall grass, goes for the jugular, and has begun eating the meat before the herd even knows what's happened. That's how the lion hunts. That makes sense for the lion with its strengths, with its speeds and all the rest of it. That's how the lion's going to go for those who are slightly separate. Now, we know that the idea, and Paul's been talking about it, and he's going to get to it even more when he's talking about the church in his class on Sunday mornings. Not been in that class because I've been in the class of my own, but good class this morning, Paul. We know that the idea of one another is very much emphasized in the scripture. God is very big on the idea of one another. I used to know how many times the phrase one another is mentioned in the New Testament alone, just for the idea of how we've to behave towards one another. Not just like they were eating together with one another, but how we're actually to behave. I think it's something like 32 times. Some of them are love one another. John chapter 13, verse 34, and many other passages that say that phrase. Care for one another. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 25. Be at peace with one another. Mark chapter 9, verse 50. Comfort one another. 2 Corinthians 13, verse 11. Serve one another. Galatians 5, 13. Bear one another's burdens. Galatians 6, 2. Be kind to one another. Ephesians 4:32. Forgive one another also. Ephesians 4:32. Encourage one another. 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 18. Build up one another. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. That's not all of them. God is big on one another. God recognizes the importance of one another, recognizes, as Paul started to touch on this morning, the importance of the church being together, being a part of one another. Community is essential. The idea of community, being together, one another, how we treat one another is essential. Hebrews chapter 10. Let's look at a few scriptures. We just mentioned all of those one another ones in passing, but let's read 3 passages that talk about the same idea. First of all, very well known one, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and verse 25. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Do you see, and it's got one another mentioned there in that passage. Do you see what being together achieves? Do you see the importance of being together? The zebra that's in the clutches of the lion didn't. The writer of Hebrews says, get together. Because you can encourage one another and you can stir up each other to do the right thing and to live as Christians. All of us will admit it is easier to be a Christian on a Sunday morning when we're sitting here worshiping the Lord. It is easier to be a Christian when we're all together for a big family fellowship night. It's easier to be a Christian when we're sitting together studying, or when we're just having a coffee together. Brethren, if you have a problem with your language, you know what? That is less of a problem when we're together. You've got to admit it. If you have a problem with your attitude, you've got to know it's less of a problem when we're together. Much easier to control. Don't be one of those on the outskirts. Don't be one of those who are grazing 100, 150 yards away, keeping yourself on the sidelines. You're opening yourself up for attack. Look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 10. Not so obvious, this one, but I think you'll see the point that's to be made here. So then, verse 10, Galatians 6, so then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. How are we to treat people? Well. What are we to do? Good. Who for? Everybody. But especially your brethren. Especially the church. Paul, that might be a passage you turn to. Do you see the importance of the household of faith? Everybody's important. Treat them well. But recognize the importance of the church. Your brethren. Be a part. Be together. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 21. I always think of Jack when I read this passage. What does he say? You need me, and I need you. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. We may all feel like that at times. We may all feel like, I'm okay. I don't need anybody. I'm going to go off here. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not going to bother going to that. I'm not going to be bothered being a part of that. I'm not going to participate in this because I'm doing fine on my own. Thank you very much. Take heed, he who thinks he stands, lest he fall. Never think what's going to happen to us. Maybe Satan is described as a lion because he finds the ones on the outskirts as easy prey. Now, don't think just because we're right in with the herd that he's not going to attack. But he finds the ones on the outskirts as easy prey. I know Graham often points to Judas as an example of that. Why? Why did Judas not manage to survive his betrayal of Jesus when Peter managed to come through his denial of Jesus? Just as bad. Just as deplorable. And Peter managed to hang around long enough for forgiveness. And Graham often points out how Judas seems to have been the outsider, both in culture, both in nationality, certainly in attitude towards different things. And when push came to shove, he didn't have the relationships with those that helped him get through it. Don't be on the outskirts. Don't be the distant. Equally, don't be the divided. Not getting along. That happens, even in the animal kingdom. And when it does, the lion will look for the gap in the defences of that group of animals. I read this about buffaloes. This actually amazed me. I didn't know this. When buffalo become aware of a prowling lion, they make a circle and instinctively lock their horns and put their hindquarters to the inside of the circle. The babies are inside the circle of protection formed by the adult buffaloes. Whenever there is a male and a female buffalo with a disagreement, there is a gap in the circle because they refuse to lock horns. The lion will keep circling until he finds a gap and then rush in. When he rushes into the gap, the buffaloes will scatter and rush off and leave the babies vulnerable to the lions, leave their young vulnerable. I didn't know that. Amazing. The animal kingdom. Even it happens there. The Bible doesn't just talk about one another. The Bible doesn't just talk about being together physically. You know, make sure you're there, make sure that you're not in the distant, that you're part of this family. But it talks about one another together emotionally as well as physically. Look at Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, we're going to read from verse 25 to 27. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbour. For we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Paul may as well say, don't allow for any gaps. Don't let there be any gaps. The way you treat each other, your attitude towards each other, watch out for those gaps. Don't give the devil an opportunity, because he looks for weaknesses. In Job chapter 1, really the first 11 verses, in fact, we won't bother. If you read the whole of the 11 verses, it's where Satan goes to God and said, God says, where have you been? I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Oh, I've been walking around the earth. Oh, what do you see? Did you see my faithful servant Job? Yeah, I did, but I noticed that he's well provided for, he's wealthy, he's got a good life. You've put this hedge around him where things are going well for him. And I think, basically the devil says, I think that's the only reason he's faithful to you. And I think if you took all of that away, he wouldn't be faithful. Satan's looking for weaknesses. In Job's case, he was wrong. I think there's some encouragement there. The devil doesn't always know your weaknesses. He thinks he knows, and he's pretty clever, and he's looking for them, but he's not always right. And he proved to be wrong in Job's case, because God says, okay, and we know the stages of it. Do this, I'll allow you to do that, I'll allow you to go this far. And Satan knows Job's going to deny God, and he doesn't. He stays faithful. Look at, again, Matthew chapter 4, verse 1 through 11, when Jesus is in the wilderness. You know, Satan should be in Criminal Minds. Who watches Criminal Minds? Profiling. Get these FBIs, and they profile people, don't they? And they come up with a profile of who's doing what and all of that sort of thing. Satan is the ultimate profiler. And Jesus goes out into the wilderness and Satan profiles him. He's hungry. I'll tempt him with food. Turn these rocks into bread. And then he profiles him in the sense of Jesus is going to be looking to convince the world that he's the Son of God, and they're not going to believe him. So I'll start tempting him to do with his identity, with his status, with his position as the Son of God. I'll make them all believe in you as the Son of God if you do this. Satan profiled Jesus. He looks for weaknesses. Maybe Satan is described as a lion because he looks for gaps in our defense. Yeah, he looks for the division. He looks for those who are not cooperating. He looks for those who are not together. Physically, not grazing with the herd, but also emotionally. Even if you're here and we're not together, he sees that. He's clever enough, and he waits for the gap, and he goes for it. Don't give him that opportunity. And then we've got the doomed. Those who are not learning from their mistakes. That happens again in the animal kingdom. And you know what? the lion's going to take advantage of it every time. He's not going to feel sorry for the stupid. He's just going to keep killing. I read about this story, and I found who it was from this time. It was observed by a guy called George Schaller, who was a researcher in the Serengeti and the surrounding areas, and he was there to research lion and lion behaviour. And he tells a story of a group of Thompson's gazelles, which I'm assuming is a breed of gazelles. There must be different kinds. So he tells the story of a group of Thompson's gazelles who are crossing a patch of thick bush in order to get to a watering hole so that they can drink. When they enter the bush, they found out that it was bristling with lions, who instantly grabbed and ate several of the gazelles on that crossing. Within the next 2 hours, the same group of gazelles, having apparently forgotten the recent murder of their companions, tried again, not once but twice, to get to the same water using the same route through the same bush with predictable results. Didn't learn from their mistakes. The gazelles are fast, and they have, as I was reading all this, they have these bulging eyes that are on the side of their head that are very good for keeping a watch out for the lion. And very interesting, as a wee side note, very interestingly, as the lion prowls up on the gazelle, and if the lion realizes that the gazelle or any other animal really has spotted them, they will sit, this is not my words, they will sit nonchalantly looking in the other direction. So it's kind of like, and then they'll look and it'll be like, if lions could whistle, they would whistle. And they'll do that and pretend that they're not doing anything. But the gazelles will keep looking at them because they know as long as they're looking at them and the lions know they can see them, they're safe. There's that paying attention. There's that never drop your guard. But you look at these gazelles. The Bible talks about not only being one another together, but one another together and on guard, alert, watchful. I used the word doomed for this point because it begins with D, but also because it goes along with the quote from George Santayana, who was a Spanish philosopher born in 1863. And he's the one who said this quote that you may know, even if you didn't know it was him that said it. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It has been perhaps changed over the years, and some will re-quote it as are doomed to repeat it, which is why I used the word doomed. Don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. Even when we're together, even when we're physically, and even when we're emotionally together, even when we're united and doing the same things and treating each other right and all of the rest of it, we can still be a fool if we don't learn from our past mistakes. Look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18. Very important here. Great passage where it talks about, obviously previous to verse 18, beginning in verse 10, talks about putting on the armour of God. But look at what he says in verse 18, after he's just told us to put on all of this armour. Okay? And in verse 18 he says, of Ephesians 6, praying at all times. So put on the armour of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication to that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints. You've got all your armour on. You're using the word of God. All of the things that he's mentioned. And even with that, be on your guard. Keep alert. Don't drop it. Don't think because you've got all the armour on that you can just take it easy and not pay attention. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. Clear as day. Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. That verse is a real call to focus. A real call to pay attention. Be ready. And then we have the text, obviously. Let's read that again, the text that Sydney read to us in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Use your head, Peter says. Think. Be careful. Not like the gazelles, making the same mistakes over and over again. Someone's going to fall. Someone's going to die. Someone's going to be devoured if we don't learn these lessons. Maybe Satan is described as a lion because he will keep punishing the same mistakes as long as we keep making them. He doesn't feel sorry for us. He doesn't care that we are being foolish. He's just going to keep using the opportunity. Brethren, we have all fallen short at times, at some time in our life. And we've known where and when it happens. Don't go there again. If that's where it happened, don't go there. We have seen those who have fallen and not got back up again. Don't go there. Be alert. Be watchful. Be on guard. Why is the lion described as the king of the jungle? I read a few things about that. There are different people. I guess it's really going to be up to you. Different people give different reasons about why they would consider the lion the king of the jungle, and some wouldn't even do that. Some wouldn't even consider it. But if you think about it, the lion is not the strongest animal in the jungle. But he hunts the strongest. The lion is not the fastest animal in the jungle. But he hunts the fastest. I think, for me, the lion is perhaps described as the king of the jungle. At least one of the reasons is because the lion, although not the strongest, although not the fastest, the lion will find a way to make the kill. And that, brethren, that's who we're up against. The lion will stalk in silence. The lion will act all innocent if they feel like they're going to be discovered. The lion will hide expertly. One of the writers I read, they are experts at hiding and, get this, in their words, quote, phenomenally patient. Brethren, that's who we're up against. Someone who is silent, deceitful, maybe even innocent looking at times, an expert at hiding, and phenomenally patient. Never drop your guard. That's Satan all over. Chipperfield, when he was talking about that Egyptian female lion trainer that was attacked, and he said the only mistake she made was a momentary lapse of concentration, he went on to say this about her. Obviously, Miss Elhu didn't notice the lion crouching down, because any trainer who sees an animal do that will immediately let the animal know they can see them. The animal will then straighten up and stay where they are, because they know that if you can see them, you're not at a disadvantage. There's the key word again. Disadvantage. Satan is looking to get us at the point where we are at the disadvantage. But brethren, that doesn't need to happen. That shouldn't happen. We have all the advantages. We have the advantage on Satan. But only if we stay close. Stay close to the herd physically. With one another. Stay together emotionally, united, spiritually, united. And stay focused, on guard, watchful, alert. If these things are true, Satan cannot have us at a disadvantage. Even as ominous as his description is in 1 Peter chapter 5. Brethren, I think you will agree that it's a jungle out there. But we have everything we need to live forever. God bless.
Thank you, Adam. And before Jack lead us again for the giving. Let's sing song number 662, please. 662.
Oh, to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. I will ever